Hello, and welcome to Oblock's Rimworld Guide to the Early Game. When starting a new game, there's a lot of things to do. Your colonists need food, shelter, and protection, and depending on the starting conditions, you'll need to prioritize one or more of these needs. In this guide, I'll be covering the usual steps I take to get a starter base up and running quickly, providing a solid foundation from which to do research, development, and more long-term planning. Depending on the start you've chosen, you'll have varying degrees of scientific knowledge. The crash-landed scenario will provide you with electrical tech immediately, whereas a tribal start requires more difficult research into the modern amenities. I'll be using a two-person tribal start as an example. The pair of colonists are starting with no gear, no money, and no food, so we'll have to provide them with everything they need to survive and grow a successful colony. I'm using all of the mods listed in my mods guide video, plus graphic mods and a few others. One of the more useful mods that wasn't previously listed is called Allow Dead Animals, which automatically unforbids wild animals killed by predators. This makes it so you don't have to spend time scouring the map and allowing animal corpses for your colonists to butcher. This guide will cover the initial siting of our camp, setting up starter production spots and stockpiles, first defenses and gear, and early buildings. Once we've got all the basics up and running, hopefully we'll have opportunities to gain or recruit more colonists to help. This is easier on the normal tribal setting of 5 colonists. Before we can get rockin', we'll want to pick a good spot for our colony. You can get by on just about any terrain type in any weather, but for this guide we'll be looking at one specific type. On the big map, select a tile that is temperate forest, mountainous, and has a minimum of 30 growing days. A longer growing season allows you to grow more crops, of course, but it will generally make for a hotter map. You'll also want to make sure that you have at least one colonist with 2 or higher crafting skill to make short bows, if you don't start with any. Now that we've entered the map tile, let's take a look around to see if there's any good defensible valleys for our colonists. You can get by just fine without, but the less mountains you have protecting you, the more sides you'll have to defend from raids. A sizable valley with 1 or 2 entrances works the best. On this map, there are 2 skinny valleys to choose from. I'd prefer the left as there's an easy area to expand into at the top of it, but at the moment there's a pair of hyenas inside. I'd rather not have to deal with these hungry predators inside the base this early, so we'll set up shop in the eastern valley instead. Once you have a map that you're satisfied with, take time to set up your colonists. On the Assign tab, set the drug policy to no drugs, and their response to fight. Unless of course you prefer run or ignore. Also in this tab, we'll see what foods our colonists can eat. Since they default to lavish meal, we'll just adjust that one. We don't want them to eat corpses and rotten food, so click these off. The only raw foods we're going to allow will be mushrooms, smoked meat, and fruits. They can also eat cooked eggs, insect jelly, and milk, as well as honey. All meals should be fine. Everything else we'll want to disallow. After this, we'll set the work priorities. You'll want everyone to do medical stuff, so set the first 3 work types to a number 2 priority. Everyone can help with wardening early on as well, but the skilled jobs are going to fall to the people who know how to do them. Since we have 1 good cook and 1 awful cook, we'll only let Rad make the food. Buck will be our constructor, and Rad will be our crafter. For gardening purposes, both colonists will be fine, but if you have someone with low skill, only let them help plant stuff until they improve. An unqualified gardener will squash your produce when they try to pick it. It doesn't hurt to have everyone on research as well, so that any idle pawns will help instead of wanking around. Now that we've set up our policies, we'll need food for the hungry pawns. If they didn't start with anything, hunt around for berries, mushrooms, and other fruits that happen to be 80% or more ripe. You'll just want to harvest enough to feed your pawns right now because there's other, more pressing projects to get to. Set up some sleeping spots near the front of your base, or wherever you'll be doing the most work. We'll build actual barracks or bedrooms later. In order to build anything though, we'll need to chop some wood. Once you've got some lumber, build a wall of some sort across the entrance or entrances to your base area. The palisade from Fortifications Neolithic is probably the best choice right now, but fences from, I believe, Vanilla Expanded work as well. They just have less hit points. If nothing else, a regular wall and a door will do the trick. Just make sure you're not putting a roof over areas you don't want to be roofed. You'll want to pick a spot near the entrance for your food stockpile. Build wooden walls to enclose the food stockpile so that the weather doesn't destroy your dinner. Place a butcher's spot or table right near here, but outside of the intended food storage building. Set the butcher to process forever. Once you get a hold of some animal corpses for meat, build a campfire nearby as well. You'll want to make a bill for a constant stock of maybe 2 simple meals per colonist. Set up a bill to turn the rest of the meat into jerked meats for long-term storage. Go out rooting for berries as needed. Next, you'll need a crafting spot to make some equipment. The best spot to place it would be inside a building, but unless you have more than a couple of pawns, you probably don't have the extra workforce to do all this at once. Set your crafter up to produce a recurve or short bow for each colonist who can use one. Recurve is better, but if you're not skilled enough, short bows will have to do. You'll also want a melee weapon to pair up with your bows, so build clubs or knives. Clubs can be made from wood and have a stun chance, so I tend to build them over knives. Equip the melee weapon as a sidearm for each colonist. If it won't let you, you might have to go in and change the allowed sidearms in the Simple Sidearms mod through the Options menu. You'll also want to queue up a full set of wooden armor for each colonist, but if you have a wall that you can shoot over or through, the armor is not a top priority. It also chews up a large amount of wood. On day 2 or 3, we'll get some fields planted so we aren't stuck eking by during the winter months. The first crop should be rice or carrots, placed as close to your kitchen and food storage area as possible. These crops grow fast, so your pawns will make the most trips to and from this field. Once this is planted, set up a few more growing zones for cotton, other crops, and heel root. If you don't have a pawn with plant skill 8 or higher, you'll have to wait on the heel root. By the way, the growing times actually take about twice as long as the number of days listed. By now, we should have a few little piles of animal skins from butchering random critters, so we'll need a storage warehouse. Set up a stockpile zone somewhere and wall it off. We don't want food, stone blocks, steel, and maybe wood going into it, so uncheck these from the options. As anyone who's played Rimworld can attest, colonists consider eating without a table to be just shy of a crime against humanity, so let's build a little 1x1 or 1x2 table and some stools. While we're building stuff, a hoopstone ring and Game of Ur will help alleviate some of the backwoods stress. Horseshoe pins and chess tables are the modern equivalents. At this point, our colonists have been roughing it out under the stars, laying on the lumpy ground for several days, and there's no chiropractor nearby. Let's build them some temporary housing. This doesn't have to be fancy, just a moderately sized room to move a sleeping spot into. You could build a barracks for a bit less relief, but may as well just build separate rooms if you have the space. We'll build an extra room or two so that we have spares for prisoners, injured guests, or new recruits. At this point, we'll just need more pawns to transition into the next phase of our base building, which will be research, planning, and stone cutting. If you've got 4 or 5 colonists, you could polish up your current base, build a lab with multiple research spots, or go get more resources stockpiled. I'll cover that in the next guide, however. In the meantime, we've got a decent little starter base to safely grow crops and craft things. Hopefully you'll find this guide to the early game useful or enlightening. Next time, we'll get our laboratory up and running so we can build better and cooler stuff. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks for dropping by Oblock's Guide to the Rimworld early game. See you next time.